Scheduled. Oh, hey, we are live. What's up, wrestling fans?
It's the Two Bros Wrestling Show. Both bros this time. Kevin
Both
and
bros.
Doug here with you. And Doug, I have to say, it's nice to see you. I know we've been back on air for like 3 weeks now in combinations that did not include each other. So thank you for picking up
hold
the
that
ball.
thought. I'll be right back.
Well, now he's going to drop the ball. But folks, thank you for joining the Two Bros Wrestling Show. While Doug goes and takes care of things here, I will say that tonight's main event topic, we are going to be discussing Survivor Series and giving you a preview of what is going down, the matches that are scheduled, the matches that we don't yet have on the books, but we think will be scheduled, as well as who'll be winning those. But before that, we're going to do the news.
Hey, do the news. I will be back. I have a house incident. I'm not sure what just happened. I'll be back.
All right. Well, good timing. Doug's going to go take care of things, and I'm going to give you a little bit of news. And it was an eventful week. We first off can't start talking about the week in wrestling without talking about the fact that the Elite is back. Obviously, we knew this was about to happen. We've had a lot in the way of previews and such, but this really goes to show that the whole incident that accompanied the fallout of the last AEW pay-per-view is now finally drawing to some form of conclusion. Obviously, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks are now back on AEW television. Their suspension's officially over. And the only shoe left to fall and completely wrapping up this ugly chapter of AEW's history is what becomes of CM Punk. We are continuing to follow that story, the latest being that AEW continues behind the scenes to try to negotiate some sort of buyout of CM Punk's contract. There's much in the way of word from WWE land that he would not be welcome in that locker room, even if Triple H decides to do business once again with CM Punk. It's obvious from what we know from AEW's locker room, Chris Jericho and other locker room leaders, that Punk would not be welcome there either. So I'm not sure what a buyout of his contract or obviously if he's owed money, buy him out of his contract. But if a sticking point with CM Punk continues to be the no compete clause, where is he going to go compete at this point in time? But Kenny and the Young Bucks are back. Last night, we found out, obviously, they were officially coming back on Dynamite on Wednesday. And then last night at Full Gear pay-per-view, they made their return in a trios match for the titles that they never lost, that they won, and then were immediately stripped of because of the suspensions following the brawl that followed All Out. So we will get more into the happenings of Full Gear. We know we are right on the tail end of the Full Gear pay-per-view, and wait for our big finish segment because I know, at least for my part, Doug and I, we don't compare these notes ahead of time, so we try to keep it fresh as far as what we pick for matches of the week and moments and botches and things like that. But I will say from my end, very Full Gear heavy, so we will definitely address Full Gear at the end of our show, so stay tuned for that. More discontent in the world of professional wrestling to talk about, and not in AEW and not with CM Punk, but in the NWA. I know a few months ago we talked about the falling out that occurred between Nick Aldis and NWA owner and Smashing Pumpkins frontman Billy Corgan. But at the time, we questioned whether or not this was a work. Well, as it turns out, what seemed like a nice wrestling angle being set up is, in fact, appears to be a shoot, and that there is legit a falling out between Aldis and the owner of the NWA. And it is a shame because Aldis, in many ways, was one of the architects of what the NWA had become and helping to bring it back, from the ashes. And he and Billy worked closely on that together. But don't expect to be seeing Aldis in the NWA anytime soon. He has continuously badmouthed the company and Billy in particular, again, for many of these interceding months leading up until the last week or two, it would almost seem as if maybe he was saying these comments in a work style, that they were definitely setting up something. But now we know that, in fact, Aldis and Corgan really have had a falling out. Corgan has pulled Aldis from this past weekend's last weekend's Hard Times 3 pay-per-view, and is content to let Aldis sit out the remainder of his NWA contract, which ends in January. For his part, Aldis used this suspension and the crowning of Tyrus as your new NWA champ at Hard Times. He used this as fodder to ramp up his criticism of the NWA and accusations against Corgan and the current booking. And if I could steal Aldis's quote, that much of the booking does not, quote, meet the Harley race test, which was a good old school ouch dig at Billy Corgan. And so there's no definitive word on how this is going to affect Mickie James. Obviously, she is a former NWA employee herself, but a lot of the criticism that Aldis has thrown out there since the relationship is broken down seems to center around Mickie's time with the company and the fact that the Empower NWA All Women's pay-per-view never received a follow-up or a second pay-per-view, and was kind of blaming Billy for destroying the women's division, as it were, in the NWA. And Doug was back for a second, and now he's gone again. We're going to go to our last news story. We'll give him a chance to hop back on. More news that may portend some bad things for AEW. And actually, this one does not relate to the Elite or Kenny Omega or CM Punk. Here we go. We'll add Doug back to the stream. There he is. He's back. You're back, Doug. I don't know if Doug knows he's back.
Why can't I hear? Can you hear me? I can't hear anything.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
I can't hear them.
Okay.
Try this.
Technical issues on Doug's end. Apologize for that. When we say the show is live, we mean it. The show is live. While Doug's working through his technical issue there, I'll go back to the story we were talking about. And that's earlier this year, we did a story on AEW's uncertain future in the wake of the merger between Warner Brothers and Discovery. Well, this week, Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav, if I got his name right, but David Zaslav spoke at a conference and addressed the future of sports on the networks. And he praised recent deals with the NHL, for example, but ruffled feathers when he said that the TNT and TBS do not need the NBA. And he didn't rule out a new deal once their current deal with the NBA expires, but he said any future deal would look a lot different than it does right now. So while AEW was not addressed directly, it's important to note that the NBA is by far the highest rated show for the highest rated programming that TNT and TBS has. So if Zaslav can be that blasé about needing the NBA, you can bet that he doesn't feel he needs AEW. And it's an indication that he'd be willing to play hardball in contract negotiations. The TV contract for AEW is currently up. So they will be, or soon to be up. This period of time, this next 2-3 months, is when AEW is hoping to get a new TV contract, a new TV rights deal, where at one point in time, in much sunnier economic climates, they were hoping to get a increase in their fees that they would be receiving from the TV stations. Instead, they right now look like they might have to accept just whatever they can get, and might just be lucky if they can have a TV deal at their current home at all. And I don't mean to be alarmist when I say that just because you bring in great ratings does not mean that the WCW the lessons of WCW could not be repeated here had they not been learned. If we learned anything at the time, is that despite what despite how inexpensive your programming is to produce, despite how well received it may be critically, but despite all these things, you could still find yourself without a television deal. And
I know we've been struggling for a television deal. So we could use some real TV engineers about right now.
We're going to fire engineering team. We'll definitely do that. Heads are going to roll.
Hey, we've already had to let Mark go after his abysmal performance last week and his demands for a higher paying gig. So, yeah. So apparently when you have a house that's about 130 years old, things happen in it. And then when you're working on a laptop that's about a decade old while your main machine is rebooting and uploading and upgrading and all that fun stuff, a lot of technical difficulties can happen all at once. I'm not even sure which camera I'm working. Okay, it's the FaceTime camera. It's this camera.
That's what I'm telling the folks at home, Doug. It's live TV. Anything can happen. This is proof that we're live.
Anything can happen.
Doug, okay. I'm just wrapping up the story. It was not centered on AEW exactly, but it portends bad things for AEW. And that is the fact that this week at a conference, the CEO of the new Warner Brothers Discovery basically said that TBS and TNT does not need the NBA. While they would be open to renegotiating once the current contract ends, that if they do sign an additional amount of time to the NBA's contract, it will look a lot different than it does right now. Which, as I was telling the folks at home, AEW doesn't get mentioned here, but if that does not spell bad news for AEW, the NBA is by far the most lucrative property that TBS TNT has. And if the CEO and as we have known and followed here on the show, cutting costs left and right, cutting series left and right, if he's willing to let the NBA walk away, he will play hardball in AEW negotiations. I mean, the thinking that they're going to go in there and get an increase on their rights deal, that's a non-starter pretty much, I would think, with him.
Yeah, that does not sound good for really any written and scripted programming on that network or sports at this point.
I mean, if he's willing to play that kind of hard ball with his most lucrative property, AEW might have to accept whatever offer they can get or look for a home elsewhere. The budget cutting is definitely continuing. And Doug, I'm actually on my last news story, so I was kind of stalling here to let you get back, but this one's a quick one, and that is the Triple H era of WWE that has seen so many returns is about to see a couple of more. Maybe not the two that people might be thinking when I first say that, because I think we're going to get to that here in a little bit. But Matt Cardona and Chelsea Green, real life couple, and the former Zack Ryder, I guess, is how WWE fans would remember him. But Matt and Chelsea have been on the independents at Impact. Matt's been in NWA, been the NWA World Champion. Chelsea's been in the NWA. She's been the Impact Women's Champion. Obviously, most of her success prior to her very, very brief run in WWE was at Impact. But they have really set the independents on fire. I mean, obviously, they have a love of the business and have managed to build an incredible reputation that reportedly Triple H has been very, very fond of and has paid particular attention to, and the rumors are rampant that it's just a matter of when, not if, at this point, that we will be seeing this power couple back on WWE television. Very likely, though, based on a tweet of Matt Cardona saying that Zack Ryder is dead, long live Matt Cardona. That does not mean that the rumors are not true that he's returning. It probably means that he will not be back as woo 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 and will be this more serious version of his character, which I think is good for all of us.
No more Long Island Iced Z.
Well, hey, he's definitely entertaining, so you never know. There might be elements of that character. There's a way to work it in, right?
There's always a way, man. Always a way.
And Doug, with that, we're ready to go to the main event. That's all the news I had, and I actually stretched it a few extra minutes to give you some time to get back, because we are on the heels of one pay-per-view and are looking at what will be the last main roster pay-per-view for WWE this next weekend. Saturday, we have Survivor Series. So we're going to talk Survivor Series. The
Give up. Are we? Are what happened? Are you there? Can you hear me? Something weird like connectivity issues just happened.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Can you?
Okay. No, it's like you froze up and then everything went black and then I got that spinning circle thing.
So,
okay, sorry.
Speaking of Survivor Series, I guess will Doug survive this broadcast? Is now the question.
Hold on a minute, Kevin. Where are you hearing it from?
I don't know if it's.
All right. Hold on.
No
You're
problem.
back.
So Doug is continuing to have issues. So that's what this show is going to be remembered by is Doug's myriad technical and home issues. But he is powering through, and we are going to power through as well. Thank you for your patience and sticking with us here. So let's talk Survivor Series predictions, matches that are not yet announced that we can pretty well say with some certainty will be occurring. And that is United States Championship match. We have seen various combinations of Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley, and Austin Theory. And Rollins looks to be headed to once again have to defend his United States Championship against his two biggest rivals. Austin Theory surprised a lot of people when he used his Money in the Bank cash in to try to wrest the United States Championship. The first person to not go for one of the world titles, but he used and when he gave his rationale this past week on Raw, it actually made a lot of sense. Like, every time I tried to thwart a Roman Reigns or prior to that, try to thwart a Brock Lesnar, like there are large stables of men and people and other things that were just preventing me from following through, essentially. And so the fact that he thought that Seth Rollins was easier pickings and that no one would see a U.S. title cash in coming made a lot of sense. And actually, I like that they followed up with some, with trying to look at what his mindset and rationale would be in that decision, because as we saw, it was not fruitful, and he did not win the title when it had his cash-in attempt, and therefore he's lost his Money in the Bank, contract opportunity now. However, what he has gained is a more serious character, and that serious character, I think, was something that has long been coming for someone as talented as Austin Theory to take that next step. In NXT, he was fantastic, but was a comic foil and showed a great bit of sports entertainment personality in his work with Johnny Gargano, and comes to the main roster and then becomes the sidekick and foil to Vince McMahon, which in many ways is good to show that the owner of the whole WWE wants you to be part of the main storylines. However, a more serious version of Austin Theory was needed if he was truly going to be a main eventer. And I think that even though he might have lost his Money in the Bank contract, gaining a serious character makes him a threat.
Hey, man,
yes.
I have an issue. I'm going to just go dark and see if I can figure this out.
Yes.
I may be back. I may not. I apologize. There's
no problem.
There's something wrong here, though. I've got to fix.
You do what you need to do. We'll just go through the matches here for the folks at home. And if you get a chance to come back, come back. But how I see this one rolling out, let us know what you think. But I think that what we saw on Monday makes me think that Seth Rollins is going to lose to Austin Theory. I think the serious version of Austin Theory is the version that's going to capture his first major title in WWE's main roster. So I'm going Seth Rollins on this one. That is the one match I think is going to be added. Let's talk about the matches that we do know for certain are occurring. So we have AJ Styles versus Finn Balor, and the issues you have here between Styles and Balor are ones that can be dated back to their times together in the Bullet Club really another lifetime ago. We have two former leaders of the New Japan Pro Wrestling's Bullet Club, and then of course the faction has sort of went out of that promotion, and various former members have had Bullet Club like organizations within other companies, and that includes within WWE. And that's kind of what Styles is doing right now with the OC. And in many ways, what Balor is kind of doing with Judgment Day. So they have a definite history here between the two. Balor obviously was trying to play on their history that they've had together to recruit Styles, and it failed repeatedly. And eventually Styles just brought his old buddies, the OC, back, and now is feuding with Balor. It's probably about time to blow this one off. And I think that ultimately AJ Styles is going to win this one just because the Judgment Day won in the last go around. It's probably time for Styles to get his win back on behalf of the OC. I don't know that Finn Balor will lose anything or lose any momentum because he still has a faction that got the victory when it was multiple people up against each other. And then you have the females now involved too, with Mia Kim being brought back to counteract Rhea Ripley on the Judgment Day side. So I think that AJ Styles can take the victory here so that it goes at least 1-1 based on the matches they've had thus far, and the feud can continue and shift to other members of these factions. So that's the way I see this one going. SmackDown Women's Championship. You got Ronda Rousey versus Shotzi. Shotzi earned this opportunity through the six-pack challenge that she went through on SmackDown after Crown Jewel. And I like Shotzi a lot. I like that she has been featured more. I liked her in NXT and not so much thus far on the main roster. So for her to even be in the ring with Ronda Rousey, I think helps Shotzi. But there's no way in the world that Ronda Rousey is losing to Shotzi at this point in time. It's just not in the cards for that to occur. So definitely Ronda Rousey retains in this instance. And that takes us to the two main event matches. And that will be the War Games matches. And that's one of the things I was going to ask Doug about. And I hate that he's not here to give his opinion on it. So I'd love to hear what you all think. But do you like the fact that the War Games concept is being brought to the main roster? This is the first time that the main roster WWE has seen the War Games format. War Games obviously is a historic WCW concept, specifically the brainchild of one Dusty Rhodes, and it was used quite often back in the WCW days. It was resurrected by Triple H in NXT, and that is where it has remained until this year. So typically Survivor Series is based on the Survivor Series style matches, which I have said on this show before, and will affirm that Survivor Series was never my favorite match style. So those 5-on-5 elimination matches are really not anything I would miss. Yes, these matches are also elimination matches, but the added brutality and stipulations and moving parts of War Games do make them more exciting. And in general, especially if you have intense feuds that are involved in these contests, that makes some storyline sense as well, that you would put all these men or all these women in a giant cage, for those not familiar with concept, that contains two rings, starts with two people, and then at an interval of time, one team gets a member that comes in, and then that same interval of time, it goes back to being then 2-on-2, then 3-on-2, then 3-on-3. So at any given time, until all the participants are involved, one side is going to have a one man or one woman advantage. And it does always make for some entertaining matches. They were very brutal and very interesting when they were taking place at NXT. I think that even though it's odd to have a Survivor Series pay-per-view without any Survivor Series style matches, I think that the average fan is going to appreciate and approve of War Games style matches over Survivor Series any day of the week. So I'm going to go and talk the men's match first because I kind of want to save the women's match and talk about it last. But the men's match, the War Games match, is the Bloodline: Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, Sami Zayn, and Solo Sikoa versus the Brawling Brutes, which are Sheamus, Butch, and Ridge Holland, Drew McIntyre, and as we found out this past week, a returning Kevin Owens. So the starts of this match came about after Crown Jewel, and Sheamus, had been injured, or at least storyline injured, and he returned, to just kind of get some revenge on the Bloodline that had put him out. The Brawling Brutes have been in a multi-month feud now with the Usos. And Sammy, on the Bloodline side, even though he's in the good graces of most of his teammates, he has been in a sort of Cold War feud with Jey Uso. And so we have all these various factors coming involved into this match. They teased that fifth member, and then they, right here on SmackDown on Friday night, they informed us that the returning Kevin Owens is going to take that fifth man's spot. That obviously plays off a long-standing relationship and friendship, legit friendship with Sami Zayn. They were best men at each other's weddings, and their days together go back way into the early Ring of Honor classic period. So there's definitely a long history there that they could play off of. So there's a lot of intertwining storylines. There's a lot of collective history being brought to this match. And I think that this is definitely much more something that we want to see as fans play out, as opposed to some fictional Raw versus SmackDown for allegiance battling for the pride of your particular brand in a Survivor Series eliminations match, which is in previous years one of the directions they tried to take Survivor Series. It always seemed to be a pay-per-view that they had trouble trying to decide what they wanted to do with, and whether or not they wanted to go with the traditional style, or if they wanted to modernize it and abandon the Survivor Series matches itself. If they stick with the War Games concept and always have this much intrigue going on inside that steel cage, I think that Triple H is onto something here. He knows how well that worked for them in NXT. I think it's going to work for this match. My prediction, and you feel free to disagree with me here, but this is definitely going the way of the faces. And I know that might fly in the conventional wisdom of the Bloodline having pretty much dominated wrestling for the last several years. But it's this type of match where you can have the Bloodline finally look vulnerable without really taking anything away from them. If you want a safe spot to have Roman Reigns take his first pinfall in 3 years, do it in a chaotic multi-man violent match where he can take that visual pinfall and lose the match for his team through whatever else had led to that occasion occurring. And he still, at the end of the day, is going to still be your world champion. And now someone has been made by pinning his shoulders and will be the next logical main event opponent for him for the title. It'll get a feud that'll come out of this that will help steer the direction into 2023 for WWE. So as we get ready for Royal Rumble in January, and then beyond that, obviously you're on the road to WrestleMania, and we all know who we think is going to end up with Roman Reigns there, and that would be his cousin. But in the interim, you got to have some matches. You got to have something for Roman to do, and I think he finds his opponent in this contest. I think Roman Reigns is the one who's going to take the pinfall here, and he has not been pinned in 3 years. Again, he'll come out of this with his shoulders down, but still the world title on his shoulder. And well, he'll have an opponent to a feud coming out of this that I think will set the stage for the following year. So I'm betting against the bloodline, something that we rarely do when predicting on this show. It's not been a safe bet for the last 3 years, but it's going to be a safe bet here. Mark my words, Brawling Brutes, they're going over. Brutes, McIntyre, and Owens. And that leaves the last match I wanted to talk about and save it for last for a reason, and that is the women's War Games contest. There are not as many internal storylines and tensions and back history in this women's contest as there is in the men's. The intrigue in this one is what we don't yet know. So what we do know is that it's the heel team is Damage Control, which, Bailey, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky, Nikki Cross, who is sort of, I guess, Damage Control adjacent at this point, and then Rhea Ripley. And the faces are Bianca Belair, Alexa Bliss, Asuka, Mia Yim, and two unknowns. Two unknowns. So I guess it is always possible that we find out this week who those individuals are. But my guess is that they're not going to use Raw and SmackDown this week to book this match completely. I think the intrigue in this match to get you to watch on Saturday night is this when Sasha Banks and Naomi return? I think it is. I think there's been way more indication over the last month that the two sides are close to making amends. Sasha has been more prominent on her social medias, showing herself interacting with WWE talent and superstars. So it's just been a matter of time before these two make their return, and they're saving it for pay-per-view, and they're saving it for a main event match on a War Games style, big entrance. So I think that even though you might not have a lot in the way of title changes or things coming out of this pay-per-view, you definitely have storylines coming out of this pay-per-view, because I think the face team is going to win here as well. Typically, War Games matches have leaned heavily towards the faces. Even back in the old WCW days with Dusty Rhodes, the concept usually ended up being that the heels would always manage to be the ones that get the extra man advantage, so that throughout the contest they are either battling even or always one guy ahead of the faces. But despite all these odds, the faces will overcome and win. That tended to be Dusty's booking style, and it is effective over the course of a lengthy match, which War Game matches do tend to be lengthy contests, that the face team ends up fighting from underneath, but somehow overcoming the odds. And here the odds are going to be that you have a faction in Damage Control, and which might as well include Nikki Cross at this point, and then Rhea Ripley, who has experience in a War Games contest from her time in NXT, against a face team with some unknowns. And so I'm saying that at the very least, you're going to see, a surprise return or two, and I do believe it is going to be the return of Sasha and Naomi. And so with that, you can't have them lose this contest. So I believe that in both instances, you're going to have the face teams go over in your War Games matches. And that, folks, that is your card for Survivor Series. So are you looking forward to Survivor Series? Do you disagree with any of our selections, any of the folks that we thought predicted to be winners or losers here? And what do you think about the possibility that Roman Reigns might take a pinfall? Do you think that is wise to have your champion take a pinfall in a contest when the title is not at stake, or does that make him look weak? I think that at this point, there's not much to make Roman look vulnerable to anyone, and so I think he needs to show a little bit of vulnerability to just make it believable that anybody might wrest that title away from him. And that's where I think we are. That's why I think Survivor Series is going to be an entertaining evening, but one definitely centered way more around storylines than actual big wholesale changes in the title picture. And with that said, let's talk Big Finish. Yes, we are on the verge of WWE's last pay-per-view, but we're on the heels of AEW's last pay-per-view for the year 2022. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. All of my Big Finish items here are from last night's AEW pay-per-view. What was my botch of the week? Well, my botch of the week, honestly, is AEW's booking. Overall, it was definitely an entertaining evening. There's no doubt about that. It was a very successful pay-per-view. It provided a quality, some great matches, some great contests. But honestly, Doug and I have experienced in person Tony Khan's energetic personality. And not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with an energetic personality, but sometimes I think that maybe overly caffeinated energy is something he brings to a booking style that can tend to be maybe a little schizophrenic. And what you had last night was in your main two contests, you had in your women's world title match and in your men's world title match, you had a situation where you've been so convoluted in your booking that you had the obvious heels being cheered by the fans while your obvious faces were being booed. Poor Toni Storm was put in an unwinnable situation where the fans turned completely against her and were cheering Jamie Hayter. Jamie Hayter is aligned with Britt Baker, who is one of the biggest heels, male or female, in the entire company. Fans should not be liking Jamie Hayter. Fans should be cheering for Toni Storm. They were not. In your main event, men's match, you had MJF, who is by any count the most despicable man in professional wrestling. He's an excellent heel, and I know he's so good at being a heel that it's hard for fans, smart fans, to not respect that and begin to cheer him. It's the old Stone Cold Steve Austin problem from the 1990s, right? And that's where MJF currently finds himself. I know things were exacerbated by the fact that they were pretty much in MJF's backyard, so it may have been hard to get that crowd to boo him no matter what. But even if you look back at Dynamite this past week, when they were not in MJF's hometown or near it, Jon Moxley, who is an obvious face in this scenario, was getting booed when he talked any smack about MJF, and MJF continues to get cheers despite whatever dastardly things he does to try to get the fans to boo him. They will just not do so. I know sometimes that is not the fault of management, but I think where you have so many folks being booked in these tweener roles that it's hard for the fans to do anything other than just pop for their favorites. And that's what I think AEW fans will sometimes tend to do. You saw that with they were forced to make the Acclaim face. At least they listened to the fans. Instead of trying to keep them heel, they made them face. They made Swerve Strickland obviously a heel because the fans' reactions sometimes dictate it. It's good to listen to your audience, but sometimes you do have to lead your audience. And to lead them, you need more steady booking. I'll give another example, and this is not the heel face dynamic, but last night there were 3 instances, not 1, not 2, 3 instances in the pay-per-view where Tony Khan went to the same well of a face faced with a decision as to whether or not I cheat to get ahead. In the case of Rey Fenix, it was, do I use this ring bell hammer that my teammates want me to use? I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And then when everything came down and he needed to do it, he used it and won. That was fine. I mean, that's in some ways some showing that sort of inner turmoil in the decision making can be good. But then you don't do it again when later on Swerve Strickland is pulling out a ring barrier and Keith Lee is debating, like, hey, why are you doing this? We don't need to do this. We're not those kind of characters. We're not, the bad guys here. I don't want to use a foreign object to get ahead. And then in your main event, you have MJF. Do I use this ring? I have for weeks said I'm going to win honestly. I'm going to win straight up. I'm not going to use the diamond ring to cheat. And ultimately, he put it away, and then comes the big swerve with Lord Regal coming and handing him the brass knuckles, which he then uses. So it just by the time it happened a third time, it just was overbooking. And I think that AEW sometimes can hurt what otherwise is a really quality product with overbooking. And that's why fans don't know who to cheer for or who to boo and just end up booing or cheering their favorites instead of the way these folks are booked or what the promotion wants them to do. So that is an issue. I'm happy for MJF. For those who didn't watch, getting into a spoiler here, MJF won the world title last night. He is a generational talent. I know he says that as part of his act, but it is true that he is. I think that they can ride him a long ways. I think they can do so as a heel. And so I'm glad they made the attempt to show, hey, you're cheering for him, but look, we're going to have William Regal turn on the Blackpool Combat Club here, or at least on Jon Moxley, and align himself with MJF, and now you boo. And it still was a mixed reaction. And so they definitely need to straighten the character out and explain everyone's motivations here. I'm curious coming out of it, what does this mean for the Blackpool Combat Club? Like, I don't see that MJF is the replacement for Jon Moxley in that group. He would not fit in with Yuta and Claudio and Daniel Bryan. However, is there a Blackpool Combat Club if you're not led by William Regal, the only person who actually is from Blackpool, England? Does it make sense? So they sort of put themselves in a corner here that there's no real good answer coming out of it, because you either break up a promising faction or you have a faction that doesn't have its mentor, who the whole thing is named after. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either, because William Regal obviously is known as a technical master, a shoot fighter, and he fit in extremely well, particularly with the three members that are more technical wrestlers, not Moxley as much as the other three, but Moxley definitely had the hard brute style that William Regal was also a champion of. So there's just a lot coming out of that main event, despite the good and how good it was. Just again, overbooking, schizophrenic booking. That is my botch of the week. Tony Khan, you need to clean up your booking. Performer of the week, also from last night's Full Gear pay-per-view, definitely Saraya. And was it the smoothest match? No. Did she have ring rust? Of course. Did she look better than she had any right to? Absolutely. But the reason I'm giving her performer of the week is not for the match itself. It is honestly just for the fact that there was a match. I think in this day and age, we've seen Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson now, as he's known, come back. We've seen Edge come back. And I think in some ways this is normalized in fans' minds, that this is the way it goes. You suffer a injury, but you never say never. And these career-ending injuries really aren't, and that people come back. These are great success stories, all of them, but let's not overlook the fact that usually when you have an injury as serious as any of these three, particularly if it's of your neck and your spine, your neuro system, it is usually not advisable that you wrestle again. And the fact that any of these individuals was able to come back and wrestle is a miracle in and of itself. Just because we've seen Danielson and Edge do it does not in any way take away from the fact that what we witnessed last night, Saraya being in a ring again for the first time in 5 years when they thought her career was over, it's nothing short of a miracle. So congratulations to Saraya. She got noticeably emotional when she hit the ramp on her way down to the ring, as one should. She had her family there as well, her brother and some other family members there to support her. She looked good. It shows, though, a lot of faith that Saraya is going to be a continued big deal in AEW. If you're going to, on someone's first match in 5 years, put them over Britt Baker, who is one of the leaders of your women's division, in Saraya's first match back, despite the fact that you could have had her take the loss and show, hey, ring rust, right? Of course, she's not going to be as sharp on the way in. That's not the way they went with it. They went with the feel-good ending, which I was fine with, and good for Britt Baker for helping put Saraya over. But Saraya, welcome back. The former page, for those of you who don't follow the AEW product, but WWE's page is now back under her real name of Saraya, and it is a success story that I'm sure she did not know would ever happen. And I know a lot of wrestling fans would have not imagined the day that we could welcome her back into the ring. So welcome back. And then finally, folks, I'm going to talk about my match of the week. And also, again, keeping with my Full Gear theme, but it definitely came from Full Gear last night. I alluded to it in my news segment at the beginning of the contest, and that was the match that took place between Death Triangle and the Elite. Was there a lot of selling? No, there was not a lot of selling. That does tend to be the problem of these multi-man matches. 6-man contest, the lucha style contest tend to be just spot fest and chaotic. And while sometimes that can be a little numbing, I think that it is also, in moderation. You can never say it's boring because it's just nonstop. These 6 men involved are also 6 of the best to do that style. It was the return of the Elite, which is something that also gave some more portent to the match itself, some additional eyes and some more importance. This was the team that was stripped of the Trios Championship when they were suspended at the end of the last pay-per-view, legitimately suspended, legitimately stripped of the titles they won as the inaugural champions. It's fair to say that a lot of people would think that, okay, they're going to get it back. It was a great match. I mean, even without the selling, even with the spot fest it became, everyone hit those spots crisply, pristinely. There's moments that looked legitimately like, legitimately as if someone had gotten injured. You could, I guess, argue how smart some of these moves may have been, but that's the style that these men wrestle, and they wrestled it to perfection last night. We also saw a really hot and invested crowd. Happy to see the Elite back. It also is just funny how wrestling fans aren't really known to be fickle. I mean, wrestling fans are loyal, and for years, WWE had to put up with CM Punk chants once CM Punk had a falling out with WWE. They could go into Chicago and 8 years later and still get these CM Punk chants because that's who the fans wanted to see. That's the kind of loyalty that CM Punk had amongst the wrestling hardcore audience. That obviously is a relationship he soured with his actions at the last pay-per-view, and that was made apparent in the Elite's return. At no point in time in the intervening months did they, on air at least, address what happened at the last pay-per-view and the fallout and the suspensions and the reason why you weren't seeing these particular superstars. They didn't address it last night when the Elite actually returned from suspension either. They didn't have to. The fans pretty much let everyone know exactly what happened and where the fans' alliances lie. The CM Punk chant you heard last night was an F CM Punk chant, and not one that was started by anyone in the ring. It was just a spontaneous chant that the crowd got going to show where their alliances are. There was a Colt Cabana chant, which also, Colt Cabana was nowhere near the ring, but it was, again, just an indication from the audience that we know what's been going on. You don't have to address it. And we are done with CM Punk. We support Colt Cabana as well as the 3 men in the ring. And I do like that the 3 men in the ring maybe came back humbled to take the loss when it would have been pretty well within anyone's rights to think that a returning team like the Elite would win and get the titles on their first night back. Instead, they went down, came back on their backs, which maybe shows that maybe there will be a more humble take on this Elite moving forward. These are executive vice presidents. And even though CM Punk was greatly the one to blame for everything that happened at the last pay-per-view, the Elite themselves were not blameless and did not necessarily carry themselves as executives. So hopefully they've learned a lesson. I liked too, not just the match was good and the psychology at the, as to will he or won't he. I like that they that Rey Fenix had to do what he did in order for that team to win, despite the fact that initially he didn't want to do it. And it is what ended up securing the victory for them. So from a performance standpoint, a behind-the-scenes storyline standpoint, and an on-screen storyline standpoint, this one hit all 3 marks for me, and it is my match of the week. If you go back and watch anything from the Full Gear pay-per-view, definitely go and watch this. And with that, folks, we are having another Two Bros Wrestling show in the books. I had looked so forward to being back on air with Doug last week. I do appreciate Doug and Mark. If you missed it, it's in the archives. Go check out Mark. I wish Doug was nearly as eloquent as Mark was. I mean, Mark was fantastic. I actually have to admit there was some jealousy on my part once I saw how much chemistry the two of them had. I wish that Doug and I had that same amount of chemistry between each other. Actually, if you didn't see it, folks, check it out. It's a lot of it's good fun. And hopefully we do get back with Doug next week without the technical difficulties that prevented him from completing tonight's broadcast with us. But we do appreciate the attempt. You see our upcoming schedule next week. We are going to be reviewing Survivor Series. So we'll get a chance to rehash some of these points and issues we talked about tonight, see what actually came true, see if any of the predictions are way off the mark, and get Doug's take on things since we weren't able to get it tonight. But I do want your take. Leave it in the comments. Let us know what you think. We're back at 8 o'clock next Sunday night. In the meantime, have a great week. Enjoy your family. Enjoy your time together in Thanksgiving, and we will see you next Sunday.